Welcome back to Face the Nation. Senator Chuck Schumer is the top Democrat on the other side of the Capitol, and he joins us now from New York City. Good morning to you, Leader. I want to pick up on something the Speaker of the House was pointing to. He wants this fight to be about illegals, as he said, and I want to be specific here because we know from our research that there is no federal money that goes towards health care tax credits for undocumented immigrants in this country. The federal government doesn't fund health insurance for the undocumented. But it is also true that states like yours, New York, does provide health care for people who are in this country illegally. And their argument seems to be the money here is fungible. And bottom line is it comes out of the federal pocket. Do you want to respond to that?
You know, Johnson doesn't want to discuss the real issue, the healthcare crisis facing the American people. So he puts up all these fake lies to try and divert attention. It's his standard operation. He just is concerned with the politics. Every independent agency that looks at this says Johnson's claim is false. And just as you said, Margaret, zero federal dollars can go to undocumented immigrants through Medicare, through Medicaid, through ACA. And so we ought to be talking about the real issue here, which is that we have a health care crisis in America caused by the Republicans. They've barreled us towards a shutdown because they don't want to deal with that crisis, plain and simple.
Well, let's talk about the shutdown in a moment. In terms of health care, where you've taken us in terms of the messaging, Democrats, as I understand it, are looking for an extension of those Obamacare tax credit. I believe you'd like them permanently. You heard the speaker say we can talk about that after the government is reopened, perhaps not permanently. But do you hear any kind of opening here for a negotiation whatsoever?
Well, right now, not. Look, Johnson's not serious about this. He sent all his congressmen home last week and home this week. How are you going to negotiate when
he says the job is in the
there?
Senate with you and Leader Thune.
Well, no, you actually need Johnson. If you're going to negotiate any agreement, you need Johnson, Thune, Trump, Schumer, and Jeffries. And the reason he sent them home is because he's more interested in protecting the Epstein files than protecting the American people from the health care crisis. We've been trying for months and months to sit down with them and have a serious conversation addressing America's health care needs. And they've refused and refused and refused. And just on your show and on other shows, when they ask him, well, will you do it in January? He says it's starting in January. He says, no, we'll have a conversation. Well, you know what? Later means never. And we've tried 45 days and 45 days and 45 days from March on. We asked them to vote on it 3 times. The Republicans in the Senate, they voted no 3 times.
That was a permanent extension.
So we need to solve this crisis.
The bill that I think you're referring to is Senator Shaheen. It was a permanent extension. It wasn't the, compromise that some Republicans have proposed.
Margaret, Johnson has not committed to any extension, and he won't until the American people force him to. And it doesn't, and by the way, the crisis doesn't start in January. 2 days ago, starting October 1st, millions of Americans are getting notices that their health care premiums are dramatically increasing. If you're a 55-year-old couple and you make $80,000, you know how much your premiums will go up if we don't extend it? It'll go up something like $25,000. The average American will pay $900 more. How do Americans who are struggling, sitting at the table Friday night figuring out how to pay the bills, how the heck can they get such an increase? Democrats are simple. We want to extend it, and so they won't have to pay that increase. And Johnson does not want to do it. He's just not serious about it, as exemplified by him sending the House home for 2 weeks. You need to be here to negotiate.
All right. You're using the word extend versus making permanent, just making clear there. And then the number we see is the average is an increase of about $1,000 in premium payments for most households that will go into effect.
But and it's horrible.
On the reopening everything conversation, sir, though, I mean, do you trust Leader Thune? And when you look at just your numbers here, 3 senators already crossed over to vote with Republicans on this short-term funding deal. Are you concerned about more defections?
Look, it's a Republican shutdown because they've refused to talk with us. Johnson, I saw him mentioned that we did it 13 times when I was majority leader. That's true. You know why? In every case, we sat down and talked with the Republicans, and there was a give and take, and then both sides didn't get everything they wanted, but we got it done. They have refused to talk to us even once.
Well,
And Jeffries and I have been trying to get them to talk to us for. They've tried to get to us to talk to them for. We've tried to talk to them for months and months and months, and they said no. The American people know that they're in charge. Republican president, Republican Senate, Republican House, that they have a responsibility to govern, which means sit down and talk with us so we can address these needs.
But back to the question of defections. Leader Thune was on another network, on Fox, and he said that there are conversations with Democrats who want to find an off-ramp here. Is he having conversations with Democrats other than you? Are you sure you can't?
I've encouraged Margaret, I've encouraged my Democratic members to sit and talk to Republicans. It's always good when Democrats and Republicans talk to each other, but 2 points. First, in those conversations, the Republicans offered nothing. But second, the only way this will ultimately be solved is if 5 people sit together in a room and solve it. And they are the president, who also doesn't seem serious about this. You know, he's putting out his memes and his things with the Grim Reaper and all of that stuff. He's playing golf. Johnson's not serious. Yeah. And so we've got to sit down. For the 5 of us, that's the way to solve this problem. But when Democrats talk to Republicans, it's a good thing. And I've encouraged my Democrats to do it, but they've offered us nothing, no change.
Have you tried calling President Trump? He seems to take phone calls.
Well,
directly.
You know, we tried to get President Trump to sit down with us weeks ago, long before the shutdown date started. He said yes. He said no. Johnson told him to say no. We sat down, the day before, and he wasn't serious. He put these red hats on the table, and he's joking around. And honestly, in the meeting, Margaret, I got the feeling he didn't even know what was happening, that the crisis was impending, that people would pay such a. He once said, they're going to pay all that. That would be bad for me. And so the court here is the American people. The American people are hearing what's happening, and they are demanding that we address this crisis. They are demanding we sit down together and do it. It's just logical. They say that, in your survey that you put out, they say that 75% people feel Trump isn't doing enough. Another survey by the Washington Post showed that not only do 80% of the American people want us to extend these credits, but 55% of Trump voters. Well, and the American people are right now talking to their senators, talking to their congressmen. They're telling them, get this done. We want to get it done.
Our CBS polling also shows that neither side is getting good grades on any of this, Leader. We're going to have to leave that here for this moment. We'll be right back. And we're now joined by Illinois Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth. Good morning, and good to have you here in person. So I have to ask you about what the president announced yesterday in regard to federalizing 300 National Guardsmen out in the state of Illinois. We've heard this threat going back all the way to August. The governor says these are not needed. Do you have any idea when they'll arrive?
Well, I believe they're going to be Illinois National Guardsmen, so they're not going to be coming from out of state. I spoke with our governor yesterday, and it looks like it's going to be about 300 Illinois Guardsmen who will be activated against the governor's wishes. So they'll be homegrown Illinoisans, and they're our brothers and sisters, our neighbors. I probably served with quite a number of them, certainly the leadership, and they'll be home. We'll welcome them. It's a misuse of the National Guard. They're not needed in this particular role. If President Trump really wanted to fight crime, then maybe he should stop defunding the police. He diverted $800 million in crime prevention efforts away from that was appropriated away from funding for our police officers. So, they're not needed, but we're going to welcome them because they're our brothers and sisters, and we're proud of our National Guard.
He has surged, or the federal government has surged agents from different groups. The FBI said yesterday they're sending folks in. Tell me about these protests, because the images look pretty intense of what has happened between people on the streets of Chicago. We're showing some of that video now around immigration issues. As I understand yesterday, ICE authorities shot a Chicago woman in the Brighton Park area. Secretary Noem claimed ICE fired defensive shots at this woman who was armed, who had appeared in a Border Patrol intelligence bulletin previously. She claims that federal agents were surrounded and were threatened. What are local authorities telling you about what they think happened here?
Well, they lie. right? The Trump administration lies. We have a president who's a known liar, and they've been lying about the situation all along. And in fact, they even shot tear gas grenades, I think, at a reporter who was simply driving by with her window open. And so we're urging people, we're urging our protesters, remain calm, peaceful protests, exercise your First Amendment rights, but videotape everything. Everybody has a phone. Tape everything so we actually have real evidence of what is happening. We know the Trump administration lies consistently. And what I am hearing is that for the large part, people are being very quiet, are being very respectful, but ICE is being very aggressive. Remember that they are zip tying children. They are raiding apartment blocks in the middle of the night, separating children from their families, pulling people out onto the streets naked. They are using Gestapo tactics in Chicago. And this is what Trump wants to do, right? He wants to intimidate the people of Chicago. That's not going to happen. And we're going to document everything and make sure, just as the judge in Portland said, that these requirements, these orders from the Trump administration are not actually tied to reality.
You're talking about President Trump's directive to send Oregon National Guard troops into Portland, and the judge said that untethered to the facts. But in this case, I mean, the Homeland Security advisor says there's a large and growing movement of left-wing terrorism organized and funded. They're posting on Homeland Security images of snipers. So we're not talking troops, we're talking about federal agents that are carrying out some of this right now. Have you seen any evidence of what Stephen Miller is describing here in terms of organization and targeting of federal agents?
No, not at all. It's simply not happening. They are lying. And so if anybody is targeting anyone, it is out of control ICE agents targeting, again, zip tying children, throwing reporters onto the ground, separating children from their mothers, trying to convince schools to turn over kids from public schools. They are ranging through the streets of Chicago, trying to intimidate everyday ordinary citizens who are just trying to go to school and go to work. That's not acceptable. That's not what America is about. And it is shameful that the President of the United States has instigated this on one of its greatest cities. He should be defending the city. He should be protecting the city. Send us the federal dollars that were appropriated in a bipartisan way to support law enforcement. They took money away from law enforcement officers, child prevention effort, violence against children prevention efforts. They've literally, this president has defunded the police.
Well, that is counter their messaging, at least. But on the messaging around the military, I want to ask you about what happened at Quantico. And just so our viewers are clear, you serve on armed services, but you retired from the National Guard. You were a lieutenant colonel.
23 years, proud of it.
Black Hawk helicopter pilot in Iraq. You served in combat. Secretary Hegseth told senior military leaders just a few days ago he doesn't want to prevent women from serving, but he's now going to require everyone meet the male standard. Let's listen to that.
When it comes to any job that requires physical power to perform in combat, those physical standards must be high and gender neutral. If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is. If that means no women qualify for some combat jobs, so be it. That is not the intent, but it could be the result.
How did you hear those remarks, and how do you think female service people heard them?
Well, this is the least qualified Secretary of Defense in our nation's history. And he's questioning the ability of the women who are actually qualified to do their jobs. The female rangers, the female that graduated from SEAL school have met those highest standards. And by the way, he is obfuscating a little bit because there are different male standards. The standard for a 45-year-old man is not the same as an 18-year-old man. So he doesn't actually talk about that. He has long sought to push women out of the military. And frankly, our military could not do its job of protecting America and keeping us safe without the women who serve in the military. If you look at some lessons we learned in Afghanistan, for example, the Lionesses, the Marine Corps, a group of women who actually went on patrol, all female units that actually was able to get intelligence from women, Afghani women, to get information on the enemy. Frankly, you've got a least qualified Secretary of Defense in the nation's history who wastes taxpayer dollars on a regular basis doing things like bringing in general and flag officers to be an audience for his dog and pony show, using them as little toy soldiers when they should be out there at their units in command doing their jobs.
Senator, thank you for your time and for your insight. We'll be back in a moment. We turn now to the former commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe, retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, and he joins us from Germany. Welcome to Face the Nation.
Thank you very much, Margaret.
I want to pick up where we left off with Senator Duckworth, who is a Purple Heart recipient for her time serving this country in combat. Men and women have different basic fitness standards. The secretary, in his remarks at Quantico, said he suggested women were being given a pass or were held to lower standards for fitness requirements. Do you think his change to the quote-unquote male standard is necessary?
I think this is completely unnecessary. I have 38 years in the Army, and we've served with women in all sorts of different environments and deployments, and I never had a case where a female soldier was not able to do what she had to do. So this seems to me an unnecessary, almost a medieval approach that doesn't reflect the requirements that we have for women and men who are intelligent, able to operate in a modern battlefield environment.
The defense secretary made these remarks at Quantico last week, as you well know, ordered in our most senior military officers to hear him lay out what he talked about in terms of changing rules of engagement. Those are, codes of conduct and standards to make war less brutal. The secretary said this.
We also don't fight with stupid rules of engagement. We untie the hands of our warfighters to intimidate, demoralize, hunt, and kill the enemies of our country. No more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. Just common sense, maximum lethality, and authority for warfighters.
What do you make of those directives to officers?
Well, that's not going to help anybody accomplish their mission. I mean, when you think about the missions that we had in Afghanistan, for example, and I think that's where some of his experience comes from, it was to protect Afghan civilians so that they could reestablish government and secure themselves. And so it was not about how many Taliban could you kill. We had already tried that, and that didn't work. So the rules of engagement are not politically correct. They're not intended to make it harder for soldiers or units to do their job. They actually are part of the mission. Why are we there? And so I don't have any experience where killing a lot of innocent people or violating the Geneva Convention is going to help accomplish the mission. I think that the idea that somehow it's going to make us better and more effective by people not having to worry about the law is going to be bad for us in the long term as well, both psychologically for soldiers, but also the trust of the American people and of our allies in American forces, where we have always lived up to international law, and that is where a lot of the respect came from. We do not want to be like the Russian army, and they certainly don't worry about rules of engagement.
And the Geneva Conventions are something that the secretary, as a private citizen, wrote about in his book and questioned whether they should be followed at all. He said, what if we treated the enemy the way they treated us? And he talked about Al-Qaeda and using some of their tactics, rip their arms off, feed them to the hogs. I mean, this sounds tough, but in terms of practice, does it risk the lives of those who are the trigger pullers, those who are on the ground, to have this message delivered from the highest levels?
Well, first of all, the Geneva Conventions were constructed starting in 1949, after the Second World War. And they were intended to protect innocent people, helpless people, non-combatants from the ravages of war, as it did happen in the Second World War. And I don't think anybody would say that Dwight Eisenhower was woke. And here he was Chief of Staff of the Army, and then Supreme Allied Commander, and then President. So this was during his time that the United States helped create and sign the Geneva Convention. So here's a guy with more combat experience and wartime experience than almost anybody. Now, when you think about modern warfare, especially when you're counterterrorism, just as Secretary Rubio was describing earlier on your program, the people, how you deal with the enemy and how you deal with populations is how you defeat an insurgency. And killing everybody in sight is not how you defeat an insurgency.
As Defense Secretary, Hegseth fired the top military lawyers who advise on lethality. Here's some of the advice he gave to senior leaders this week.
You kill people and break things for a living. In this profession, you feel comfortable inside the violence so that our citizens can live peacefully. Lethality is our calling card, and victory our only acceptable end state.
What do you think that means?
Well, first of all, it's not connected to the reality of how these things happen, how wars are won. First of all, the political leadership has to describe the end state. What is it we're going to do? Why are we sending troops somewhere? What are they supposed to accomplish? And usually, it's not going to be by killing everybody in sight. So I think there's a disconnect between this idea that it's all about lethality and that we kill people and break things. That's not the mantra of any Army unit I was ever in 38 years. It was always about accomplish the mission that was assigned to us, carry out every lawful order, and do it in such a way that protects civilians and ensures that all of our soldiers are protected and come back home safe. This idea of break things and kill people, that's what the Russians did in Bucha and Mariupol. That's not who we are. We're the soldiers of a free, democratic country.
The president also spoke at that gathering. He referred to the enemy within. He also spoke about using U.S. cities like Chicago as training grounds. Are you comfortable with people thinking that?
Well, look, I think, first of all, U.S. military, our fellow citizens should be confident that U.S. military will always carry out lawful orders. And so it's alarming when all of the judge advocates general, or the Army or the military lawyers are sacked or sent away, because commanders do need to have legal counsel as they receive orders and they look at these complex situations. But our troops will carry out lawful orders.
Thank you.
I guarantee you that no soldier wants to have to use force against American people.
Lieutenant General, thank you for your insights. We have to leave it there. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.